Hi, everyone. What if our current global challenges aren't signs of it ending, but birth pains of something extraordinary? Today, I'm sharing insights from my conversation with Dr. Jude Currivan. She's a cosmologist, a physicist, a futurist, and a planetary healer, and she offers a radically different way of seeing our times. Instead of viewing our world through the lens of metacrisis, and we've all heard that word a lot over the last year, Jude invites us to see this moment as a metamorphosis, a fundamental transformation where humanity, like a caterpillar becoming a butterfly, is dissolving old patterns to emerge with entirely new capabilities. In our conversation, we explore what this means for leadership today, moving from separation to connection, from control to service, and from surviving crisis to consciously partnering in our collective evolution. If you're ready to shift from fear-based thinking to possibility-centered leadership, this conversation will give you both a framework and the hope to lead through these transformative times. I just want to thank you so much, even though we met a few years ago and then have only had one interaction since then. The first time we met, it felt so familiar. Our conversation was so deep so quickly. And then the second conversation, the same thing. It feels like an old friend that I'm talking to, a new friend that's an old friend. So I really appreciate you taking the time to just have a conversation with me about thriving leadership.
Love it. And Renee, I'm so glad we're having this conversation now because before we came on the record, we both recognize what a turbulent time this is. So it just feels the right time, the perfect time for this third conversation.
I totally agree. And before we dive into that, you have such a varied background from finance to quantum physics to planetary healing to author to. There's so much there. I wonder if you could share just a little bit of your background and how you arrived to where you are. And I know I'm asking you to do something in a short version that's a really expanded, kind of rich life that you've had. But if you could just give, for the people who are listening, a little bit of background of who you are.
Thanks, Renee. Well, first of all, I would say I would agree. It's been a very scenic route. I think I think the golden thread that's connected the journey, all the which ways it has, is by me being extremely curious about anything and everything. And my mum used to say that curiosity was my middle name. She also said occasionally, and you know that curiosity killed the cat. That bit I didn't really listen to. But, it's been an incredible way, shower, way finder, way inviter, way encourager for me all the way through. And when you say, how did I get here? I have no idea how I got here. I realized one of the deep, deep life lessons I learned many, many years ago was that our sense of control is, as indeed our sense of separation, are both illusory. Reality is real, but separation is illusory. And I'd say our sense of control is also. And what I've found over all of the journey is when I've let go, either trusted my intuition or let go and trusted the universe and flowed with the what is flowing rather than trying to hang on to what was or grasp what might come, is to learn to be present, to be literally in the here and now. And as a good friend of mine says, Glenda Yeon, choose the next wise step. So whether that's been, moving into service as a planetary healer, planetary, before that one-on-one spiritual, psychological healing, before that an ongoing cosmologist, um, futurist, corporate person. Because what I realise now, as Joran Kierkegaard once did, is we live life forward and understand it backwards. So we can have this conversation now, and I can go, "Oh yes, Renee. Well, I did this and that." Anyway,
Sure.
I see it now, and I appreciate now because what I'm able to share now is the confluence of all of those steps and pathways and byways to this point and at this time where hopefully I can serve the good of the whole in ways far more than I could have even a few years ago because the journey continues.
Well, I'm so appreciating that this idea that we live our life forward and then we see it backwards, and we as we look, we see all of these rich threads. It's like, oh, that's why that happened. Oh, that's why that happened, and everything starts to make sense in a whole new way
Yeah.
that doesn't always make sense in the moment, or so thank you for that. And I so appreciate the conversation we were having before we started recording about this in time of accelerated change and complexity and disruption and turbulence. That is the word that I've been using the most. It's just turbulence. No matter where you're standing on a side of a pole, if you feel like you're on a side of have an opinion on a certain side, no matter where you are, or if you're in the middle, it
Yeah.
still, for most people, feels like a very accelerated and turbulent time. And we were talking about that being the word of metacrisis, because the metacrisis is a word that now that's being used a lot. We have all of these crisis upon crisis that are impacting each other.
Mhm.
And you started sharing with me a word that you're preferring during this time. So I wonder if you will share that now that we're recording it, and talk a little bit about what does it mean to thrive as human beings during this period in our world.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, the first point was that, yes, I am reframing what you mentioned we're calling, a lot of folks are calling either polycrisis or a metacrisis. And I'm suggesting that we can reframe it as a metamorphosis. And as an evolution biologist, as well as lots of other hats, when I see the sort of incredible transformation that caterpillars make to butterflies, that's just one aspect. I mean, some species go through a metamorphosis several times in their lifetime. Eels don't just do with one metamorphosis, they have several. So, but a metamorphosis is a fundamental, radical transformation. And I think that the point of a meta-crisis is there is no upside of that. If we frame what is happening in those terms, it's an invitation, I think, to disempowerment, to lack of hope.
Mhm.
And yet a metamorphosis doesn't take away any of the existential threats, it doesn't take away any of the turbulence. But what it does is it sets it in an evolutionary potential, a possibility. A caterpillar going into a cocoon, I would suggest, doesn't know that it's going to go out the other side of the cocoon as a butterfly.
Mhm.
And yet evolution has meant that the cells that are dormant when the caterpillar are born activate in that cocoon. So in a
Mhm.
sense, another level of perspective that begins to be activated in through that metamorphosis process. The point is that what happens is the old body of the caterpillar dies, it dissolves into a nutrient soup. The only thing it can keep doing is breathing and digesting. Everything
Mhm.
else goes. But in that nutrient soup, these imaginal cells, as they're known, which are there all along, they were there from when the caterpillar was born, but they then become active. And when they become active, they start to form the potential, the body of the emergent butterfly. So what happens is the imaginal cells are activated, they start to grow, and they start to find other imaginal cells, and they
Mhm.
start to form organelles. And the organelles then become the antenna and the wings and the legs and the body and the eyes of the
Mhm.
emergent butterfly. So what happens through that process? When the butterfly is born, first of all, the dying caterpillar fights the butterfly. It fights those activating cells, but that makes them stronger. Secondly, when the butterfly comes to that emergence, it needs to be it needs to find its way to fly. If a human being tries to help a butterfly when it's just come out of the chrysalis, it will kill it.
Mhm.
And so there's a process of self inner urge to evolve that goes through this whole process. And I feel that's what's flowing through us at the moment. And the point about the caterpillar, it sees the world as a plunderer. It just wants to eat, basically.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it sees the world through very simple eyes. The butterfly has a whole new way of living as a pollinator. And crucially, it sees the world through literally different eyes, complex eyes that see a much more abundant variety of color and space and time. Literally, the butterfly's the consciousness evolves through that process in one lifetime, in that process
Mm.
through metamorphosis. And it seems to me by reframing what we're going through instead of a metacrisis as a metamorphosis, it offers us some perhaps more profound understanding of what's all going on.
Mhm.
And also it offers us, I would suggest, empowerment
Mhm.
and authentic hope and the evolutionary potential of what we can become.
Jude, I have heard the caterpillar to butterfly transformation story and metaphor most of my career. So the last 40 years, 35, 40 years of my career. And it has never meant more to me than it does right now. And how you are speaking about it feels so much more now in my own cells as um, as true, a metaphor that can really support us in framing our situation in a way that we can be hopeful, that we can see possibility that we couldn't see before, that we can imagine a a future that feels it may not feel less turbulent actually, but that feels like we have a relationship, a healthy relationship to whatever's going on, and a healthier planet, a more connected planet, between people. So I just wanted to thank you for bringing that metaphor kind of back into my world. It's one I've used as I've been teaching around the world, but as you were speaking about it, I could literally feel it in a whole new way, and how important it is for us to hold frames of reference right now that are essential to being well and living well and relating well and working well and all right now in the middle
Absolutely.
of all the turbulence itself. So for you then, for all of us in the middle of this time, in the middle of this metamorphosis, what do you believe? And you can even answer this just for yourself, but also for all of us, if it insights you have for all of us. What does it mean to thrive right now in the middle of metamorphosis?
Well, I think first of all, our narratives are the stories we live by. So if we are living with a narrative of separation, which is the old paradigm, the hitherto prevailing paradigm, it's the paradigm that's brought us to this point essentially, because it's based on a mechanistic science of the 19th century that was there when, and its technologies drove the Industrial Revolution. So that mechanistic science became not just the science of the day, but also the structures and the organizations and the hierarchies and the exploitative perspectives of the day, because it was built on a perspective of materialism and separation. So that is not a thrivability paradigm.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've been trying to thrive almost despite it for the last 100 years. Yeah, I'm gonna thrive regardless,
Right.
because all of it is not supporting thrivability. What is now being discovered at all scales of existence across many fields of research turns that old paradigm on its head, because it's actually bringing forward an understanding that instead of an essentially dead universe, meaningless, purposeless, whatever, and where consciousness somehow gets there and arises from material brains, that is being turned on its head. And instead, what is merging is an understanding of a meaningfully existing and purposefully evolving universe, a living universe. I would actually go so far as to say a loving universe, because perhaps the most profound definition of love is right relationship, which is indigenous traditions, and our universe exists and evolves in right relationship at every level of its being and every level of its evolutionary potential. So by bringing that into an emergent understanding, we can actually stand on that existential reality that we are truly inseparable
Mm.
from each other. And the unitive nature of our universe expresses itself through radical diversity. We can stand on that ground, and we can begin to share and understand and speak to a new narrative, a unitive narrative that's both right here and now and forward, but also is ancient because it's a narrative of universal wisdom traditions and indigenous wisdom teachings. So for me, having that underpinning and framing us and empowering us innately nourishes us. It's like we can be replanted into deep, rich soil of this
Mm.
understanding,
Mm.
and we can take up through our roots those nutrients of that understanding and feel ourselves grow in it, spread our branches into it, and evolve through it. We can come together as imaginal selves, linking up and lifting up together
Mm.
as I speak to, and leveling up and lighting up together. These are the times because our universe, it seems to me, has an innate evolutionary impulse. It's had it from the get-go nearly 14 billion years ago. Now it is in full tide on our planetary home and through us and through our planetary mother Gaia. So that's where my sense of thrivability comes from, because I feel myself a Gaian.
Mhm.
We're in it together, literally. The entire sentience of our planetary home and beyond are in this pivotal moment of choice. And that's where I thrive from, the deep roots of my love for our planetary home. And you know what we care for, we care about. What we care about, we care for.
Mhm.
So us understanding this, us Renee, us awakening to this, deep within us, it's not just a cognitive understanding, but a deep experiential and embodiment of this. I know your work is so wonderful in terms of inviting folks into this deeper experience. This is how we thrive,
Mm.
because this is who we really are, and this is who we can evolve to become. And that thriving is in every moment, amidst all the turbulence, because we can see the world through those eyes of relationship.
Mhm.
It means we can actually feel the world through love rather than through eyes of fear and separation. And it's not easy. I never say it's easy, but it
Yeah.
is who we are, and it's who we can grow and evolve to become, and we can only do it together.
My brain and heart are sparking all over the place. First off, before, just in preparation for our conversation, reading some of your work and thinking about the conversations we have had in the past, there was a quote that I pulled out that to me has been the most moving quote, and I'm going to read it to you. And it's interesting that we're already here. So this is something that you said. For me, the opposite of love is fear. Love connects, fear divides. So, in a sense, the old science is a cosmology of fear, a cosmology of scarcity, a cosmology of separation. And now you're talking about how do we, in some sense, shift to a cosmology of love, to a cosmology of thriving, to a cosmology of our deeper flourishing. But in that shift, it's about reconnecting to who we essentially are in the first place. So it's really a re-understanding of
So,
who we are. So it's interesting that it is at both levels. Number one, it is a shift because we have been very socialized, and much of the ideas that are the rivers of consciousness in our culture would remind us that we're separate and that we should fear each other. So there's much to tell us to be in fear because we are separate. And yet, I find too, when we're working with executives and you're having deeper conversations about who do you believe you are? I could say, who do you think you are? But who do you believe you are when we get past the layers of what society tells us who we are, and we really check in to our being, deeper questions of being and existence. Why am I here? Who am I? How, in what ways am I connected? People consistently get to a place of realizing this sense of deeper connection, deeper love, um, lack of separation, this desire to feel alive. So it's both a shift in our ways of being and operating, and yet it's also to make that shift a reconnection to who we essentially are in the first place. And I'm wondering what you have to say about that, especially to all of us, and I'm one of them, I'm us, who in my daily life doesn't I don't always have as my center of gravity a sense of connection. I
Mhm.
still will have often a sense of separation, and I've been putting practices in my life, in place in my own life to keep reminding myself, no, you are connected to the all. You are connected to the person you might perceive as your enemy. You are connected to, So I'm wondering, what would you say to someone who says, I hear you and I agree at some level, and yet my whole way of operating isn't centered
Mm.
in this cosmology of love and a cosmology of connection.
Well, first of all, I love what you said there about both and, because I'm a both and girl too. Whenever anything comes up and it's an either or, I sort of go, what am I missing here? What am I missing here? And it's more than being a natural peacemaker, which I think is genetic, because my mum was, my grandma was, I suspect, all the way down. It's more than that. It's a realization from all of the science that I've studied since I was crazy, I know, but 4 years old. So I've got a lot under my belt on that particular part of my journey. But the science, one of the challenges of the scientific method as we've pursued it, and it's been a great method in many ways, is it separates, it takes things apart.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's what's called reductionism, as you know, and it takes things apart, and it's very helpful in many ways. But as Deepak Chopra once said, when you take apart a radio, where does the music go?
Mm.
And the reductionism of a scientific method is a both and. That's one way, but we also need to come from the wholeness, because all living systems, including our living universe, so everything's living in that regard. So the entirety of our universe as a living system at all scales is its whole, which is why I wrote a book called The Cosmic Hologram, because in a hologram, the wholeness of a hologram is expressed in every part, but no part is separate. They're nested, they're relational, and they're ultimately interdependent. So in that sense, by really bedding that into not just our awareness, but how do we embed that knowingness, which is a gnosis rather than a kenosis. It's a
Mhm.
gnosis. It's deep within us, into our lives. And I'd suggest, first of all, there's no one way of this. It's a both and.
Mhm.
I would suggest that there are many, many, many ways of doing this. So for me, it's a question: what makes my heart sing? Because that when something makes my heart sing, I'm in resonance. I'm in literal attunement. I mean, the language of music is lovely, because our universe is also a sort of harmonic, resonant symphony, as it were, of consciousness. So what is it that makes my heart sing, and how can I on that love it, respect it, nurture it every day? And it doesn't matter whether, whatever it may be, as long as it doesn't hurt others. But I mean, I know that I need, if I'm home, I will aim to be in my garden every day, even if it's for a few minutes. And at this time of the year, and as a grower of vegetables, the joy of seeing a runner bean come up, you wouldn't believe how happy that makes me.
Mhm.
But
I would. I did.
yeah,
For me, it was snap peas last year.
oh my
When I saw
goodness,
that, they're just so because they grow also so quickly too, and you see them every single day. Yeah.
I know. And it literally is the miracle of Mother Gaia's ways. But so whatever it is, whether it may be yoga or meditation, it may be dancing around the kitchen table, which is also one of the things I love. Um, but to do that every day, not because we're all busy, and often we say, "Oh, I can't find time for that."
Mhm.
We can't not find time to be joyous. We can't not find time to know that we are loved. We cannot not find time to love others, to be kind to whoever we meet. And also, when that eludes us, to be gentle with ourselves. But whatever it is that connects us in our lives, nurture that, grow that, water that. We literally, I spoke on a call yesterday of Global Earth Day, and to a wonderful organisation or imaginal cells around the world called Integral Cities Earth. And I talked about being a gardener, and I suggested it's time for us all to be gardeners and to grow our hearts.
It's interesting because so many of the practices, when you say what makes your heart sing, so many of the practices when we're working, coaching leaders, coaching teams, et cetera, that people will come up with are the things that they feel like help them manage their stress. So the point really is managing stress, to garden, to dance, to sing, to whatever. And yet what you're saying is these same practices taken at another level, um, we cannot not do them every day because what they do is help us remember ourselves, remember our wholeness. And then from there, we show up differently. We show up differently in our family relationships, for our neighbors, for our community, for our workmates, for our whoever,
Yeah.
because we are showing up from a different frame of reference, this reference of connection and reference of love and lack of separation. What are you noticing? You brought up the integral cities network of imaginal cells. What are you noticing as ways of leading, of ways of working that you believe may be different, a different model, kind of showing everyone something else can be true for how we lead, for how we live, for how we work? What have you been noticing as you've been out talking to people around the world?
Yeah, I'm more than talking, literally working with to sort of serve these changes. And they are happening. I mean, we don't hear about them so much in the mainstream media, but they are happening. And they're happening at grassroots level, they're happening in organizations, as you well know, they're happening at heads of government. I mean, I'm about to go to Iceland in early May for a gathering of the Spirit of Humanity Forum that's also overlapping with the Wellbeing Alliance. And one of the things that they're doing now, having traveled their own paths for some time, is they are coming together in collaboration, beginning of that relationship. And what's so beautiful is that the Spirit of Humanity Forum has been very much from the wisdom of being, the silence and the hearing and the listening of being. And the wheel is alliance, the Wellbeing Alliance, which is working with a number of countries, has been, get your sleeves up and get doing. And
Uh-huh.
both now, and sort of, I'm really enjoying sort of serving both of them in this time, is for the Spirit of Humanity to balance the being with more doing,
Mhm.
and to balance the wheel, economy and alliance of the doing with more being. And it's back to the both and, because the being, that depth of being is like the roots of trees, then nourishes the spread of the branches and the wider doing. So I'm noticing that Leadership. Well, first of all, not leadership as the old hierarchical, 19th century mechanistic science stuff, but leadership that serves the good of the whole,
Mhm.
servant leadership. And in my experience, that requires a certain amount of inner awareness to come into that perspective. And I know we also talk a lot in coaching circles about sovereignty, that sovereignty, the authenticity of one's being. But I would like to invite us to go beyond sovereignty, get to that point, and then realize there's more to go. And the more to go is serveranty,
Hmm.
because, the most benevolent sovereigns are servants of the people. And so servant leadership and that sense of servanty coming from the understanding of interdependence and interdependent wholeness, I think is a really, really fundamental leadership perspective. These, I'm coming to call along with a dear friend who is an ex-under Secretary General of the UN, in between times. So in these in between times, I think it's even more important to move into that perspective. The second thing I'd suggest is, again, going back to the hierarchies, we have roles. We have roles, and those roles are pretty much dependent on where we are in a hierarchy and our status and all the rest of it. And I would suggest that as we move through that inner journey of self-discovery and that remembering of wholeness and interdependence, and yet our uniqueness, is to stand in that authenticity, but as soul models rather than role models.
Mm.
Be all that we are, not just the role that's on the plaque on the door or on a business card or even a job title, but bring our souls into all that we do, not just in a work environment, but literally throughout our lives. So those two, I think, are key. And then it comes, I love now more and more these balances of what I call feminine attributes and masculine attributes. And it doesn't matter whether we're men or women. It's the attributes of, attuning and aligning with what is flowing rather than trying to control it. And yet
Mhm.
realizing that metrics are important.
Mhm.
There are key performance indicators that have a good place in this, but they're not the be all and end all.
Mhm.
If they're helpful to the evolutionary potential and flow of what we're being involved with, great, because they help to give that body coherence and intentionality, but leave the permeability of possibility to flow
Mm.
through all of that. So those are just some initial thoughts on to respond to you.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I know we are starting to wrap up, but I would love to ask you two more questions. And the first one is, what can you imagine possible? It's not a question that I expected to ask you, by the way. But what can you imagine is possible for as we engage in this metamorphosis together?
I can imagine two arcs actually, amongst many others, but two arcs. I think the first arc is if we don't wake up to remember we're inseparable, that we don't wake up to realize we are spiritual beings having a human experience. If we don't realize that we are microcosmic co-creators of our universe and its evolutionary potential, if we don't wake up to that, but we see the world, continue to see the world through eyes of separation and mechanization, then I see an arc that involves transhumanism, giving away our power as humans before we've even begun to awaken to how powerful we are. Technological future where we are progressively diminished because the creativity that is innate to us is downplayed for AI, which is great at summarizing and synergizing, but does not have 14 billion years of innovative, creative heritage that we have. That's one arc. And that arc foresees the possibility of humans being born on the moon and being born on Mars and leaving our good Earth. And I'm going to be writing an article soon saying babies can't be born on Mars. And there's a profound cosmological reason for that, because we are born, born and live in a gravitational environment that over 4 billion years has nurtured our bodies. We can't differentiate cells in space, in weightless, because there is no gravitational gradient for informational instructions to create a body.
Mm.
It's desperately dangerous and mistaken, in my view, to think we can just up sticks, leave the mess we've left behind here, and go forward as technological humans, probably somehow connected with AI, whatever. That's one arc.
Mm-hmm.
The other arc is to awaken to our profound heritage and of microcosmic co-creativity with the entire evolutionary potential of our universe and planet. It is to wake up to realize that mind and consciousness isn't something we have. It's what we and the whole world are. It's to wake up that we are members of a vast communities of universal life and a universe that is unitive. And so we have attributes, we have capabilities that transcend space and time, because that's what our universe does. You know, within space time, yes, there's a finite speed of light, which is the speed cop for signaling and causality, crucial. And it's a both and again. Our universe exists and evolves as a unitive entity. We know that. That is not up for debate. But what that means, and it is a conscious, sentient being, and we're part of that. So we have attributes. We are innately telepathic. We are innately intuitive. We have so many capabilities and capacities and evolutionary potential. And if we don't now wake up to the potential of those, we're likely to give that heritage away. So one is that we give our heritage away, and the other is we awaken to it, and live it, and evolve it, and become conscious co-evolutionary partners with our entire planetary home and universe. That is the invitation, it seems to me, of the universe that personally I say yes to. I say yes to.
Well, I do as well. And I am so grateful that you are on this planet, sharing this frame of reference that is hopeful and that has so much possibility, that really draws on the best of us and our imagination and our potential and our deepest potential, individually and together. So really, thank you for everything you are doing all across the world to give voice to what's possible. I think so many people are needing to hear it right now.